Well, good day to you. This is Nigel Wilson. We have for an interview, and he's a terribly interesting chap, important CEO in the UK. And I wanted to kick off with a bunch of kind of political questions, which I know he can amply field. But then we're going to dig more into some of the talking points that he wants to discuss, which are very pertinent to investors, businessmen, economists, and so on. So thank you for doing this, and we'll kick it off. Obviously, because of where you are and who you are, give us a sort of a feeling about what's going on politically, but most in terms of investment and economics concerning the Brexit process.
Well, I think the Brexit process in the financial services sector has been very well handled by the regulator. We've had 4 years to prepare. We're fully prepared. I think most of us understand what the new rules are. We've adapted to them. So I feel very good about that. I think at a macro level, the UK economy remains a really good place to invest. And so I think we'll see a continuation of the investment. I think there's a lot of negotiations going on in Brussels. I had the benefit of a call with the Prime Minister yesterday, where he was sort of trying to be reassuring to the business community it'll be all right on the night. But there's still quite a lot of emotional subjects like fishing, which employs a tiny number of people in the UK, but has great historic importance and indeed is important to some of our European partners. And so lots of I's and T's need crossing. But there doesn't seem to be a fundamental reason why the deal can't be sorted out and that we move, I won't say seamlessly towards Brexit, because it hasn't been a seamless movement by any means. But we're still very confident about the UK's position in the global economy.
So that leads me to my next question. Is there an expectation or an aspiration that a new independent Great Britain will want to join in terms of trade more closely with the United States and Canada?
Yes, I think there's an expectation, certainly, that we will work even closer to America and Canada. I think we will clearly still be very close to Europe. But I think the philosophy of the country will change slightly because we'll have created this opportunity to have a much more independent future. And we must grasp that by seeing what are two huge economies and two friendly economies that we can work very closely with. And America and Canada are going to continue to be parts of the growth engines of the world, both from a knowledge point of view, a technology point of view, and leadership in lots of other areas.
And without getting too much into detail, because we're taping this before it's going to be aired, but what of the uncertainty of the U.S. election, and what are sort of what's going on in the investment and business thinking in the UK right now over that situation?
I mean, there's uncertainty everywhere, and there's more uncertainty than any of us could ever imagine. And we have managed to do incredibly well. I go back to 1992 when we had the Euro crisis in Britain, and we had to exit the exchange rate mechanism, and it was all doom and gloom, and the world was going to end. And in 1993, we had a booming economy, and I think that's what happens to economies, and that's why we take a 20, 30, 40, even 50-year view. Our recent partnership with Oxford University is over 50 years in duration. They wanted 100 years originally. We explained we had no liabilities that lasted for 100 years, so it was very hard for us. And I think we have to look through a lot of the political noise. And I'll give an example. There's lots of discussions going on between China and the United States. But at the same time, the Chinese are given 100% owned licenses to a lot of great American firms, BlackRock and Fidelity and Vanguard and JP Morgan and Citibank all seem to be making a huge amount of headway in China. And business, gets used to working through, different political cycles.
Of course, another problem is the pandemic. And we're all in the pre-vaccine era. That's what I like to call it. which is creating a lot of issues. Without guessing when the vaccine may come, and it might be Oxford's vaccine, who knows, AstraZeneca, yes. Oxford's. But we will probably get a vaccine. But have there been some permanent changes to the investment climate and outlook as a result of the pandemic? I see sort of acceleration of certain trends. Obviously, remote work, that's a no-brainer. But other trends such as anti-globalization and, the de-urbanization going on. People are leaving cities, certainly in North America, in quite large numbers. Maybe it's temporary, but maybe it's not. And supply chain disruption. What permanent trends do you see resulting from the pandemic, and are they all temporary?
Yeah, I think there's been some positive trends during the pandemic as well. I think we've all been very aware of the negative ones, and you highlighted technology, where we've all, not just the technology companies, but I think everyone has been managed to adapt to new technology in an incredible way. And so we've done it basically 3 years developments in 6 months. We're beginning to apply that to many more of the business models and the investment opportunities that we see. And therefore, people are becoming a lot more aspirational about telemedicine, about digital care, about digital healthcare. And so the word digital and technology is appearing in many more places because we're all recognized that we can do things quicker and more efficient by using technology. Because technology is the easiest it's ever been in my lifetime. I spent part of my life working at MIT, and I worked as a computer consultant. And coding was really difficult in those days. Coding is trivial by comparison now. And that's opened up a huge opportunity because lots of people realize they can do coding themselves. It doesn't take a long time to learn, and it can make a difference to their lives. And so there's lots of downsides, but I think there's a lot more upsides as a consequence of what's happened. We've seen that various parts of society need better solutions. Later life living in particular, where care homes have been devastated, not just here in the UK, but also in Canada. And that's really making us think about, what does the care home of the future look like?
That's interesting. Now, on to the recovery. You have an interesting attitude, and I think it's important, but I'd like to have it explained better to the audience, is that the recovery has to be investment-led. I mean, we can't all go on a guaranteed basic income as much as maybe a lot of people would like. But could you just sort of roll that out as to where this investment recovery should be directed and how it will unfold?
Yeah, we sort of learned there's an infinite amount of money, but the money is all going from government to consumption, basically, directly, with not a lot of economic activity happening. And that is a non-sustainable long-term position. I mean, we start with a very different lens, but by given the nature of the business we're in. The world's awash with liabilities. Pension liabilities, which are 20, 30, 40 years. Climate change liabilities, 20, 30, 40 years. Infrastructure liabilities. And let me tell you, America leads the way in infrastructure liabilities. They've got a really poor infrastructure system. There's an enormous amount of money sitting on the edge or invested in very low yielding assets. And we need to match those assets and liabilities at a big picture macro level. So literally trillions and trillions, 30 trillion for climate alone, but pension liabilities heading towards $100 trillion. And so we've got to create assets which match those liabilities, which are not just government securities, but a whole range of positive things that need to be done. And, the government can create a framework and invest in some of the soft infrastructure around that, reskilling people and, creating grants so that people can retrain and do what they want, create a better life for themselves. But, we as a group and many other companies across the world have an enormous opportunity in all of these different sectors by creating long-term assets that create a predictable cash flow to match the liabilities that we already have at a global level. And there's nothing stopping us because there's an enormous amount of demand. We're going to create a lot of unemployment during this pandemic, and it solves many societal issues at the same time if we invest in very long-term assets, like I mentioned earlier at Oxford University, which is a £4 billion program just in one university in one country. Imagine if we start scaling that up across the world.
What is impact investing? Does that fall within this topic?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question now, because it partially falls within that topic. But we have defined benefit pensions and defined contribution, or 401k plans. We're always of the view that the 401k plans should be more dynamic in what they invest in, particularly as some people don't need the income from 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And at the moment, some of the best opportunities in the world are very much the preserve of the richest people in the world, because they get access to them. But the power of pensions means that we should be allocating a small amount initially, but hopefully a large amount going forward to impact investing, things that are going to really make a difference. A software company, a healthcare company, a genetics company that's in startup, which can get some funding from DC pension funds, which in the UK have 420 billion. We have about 100 billion of this stuff, which quickly rises because we're in the growth phase in the UK, like maybe the United States, which is further down. So there's literally tens of billions of pounds of impact investing funding sitting in deep DC pension funds, which is largely sitting in a default fund, which was the middle box of the first 5 on the first page. And when you thought about it, you just tick the default box. And that's, Kahneman and Tversky research tells us that's what people do. Well, we need to educate people better to get them to make different choices with their DC pension and really see how we can make impact investing really important to economic growth.
Sounds risky.
It doesn't sound risky, but that's because the richest people in the world are making more money out of this than anything else. And therefore, we have to think in a risk over a 20, 30, 40, 50-year time horizon, which is how we think. When we decided we'd regenerate towns and cities in the UK and spend billions of pounds doing it, people went, it's very risky. And, we built some housing in Salford, literally about 15 metres away, the width of a very narrow river, from the most expensive real estate in Manchester. But people told us how risky that was. That wasn't risky at all. It was just people's perception of what is risk. The people who helped fund the IPO of Amazon, was that risky? Boy, did it look risky in 1997. But actually, within that pool of risky investments, there will be some incredible ones. And by definition, you only invest in those as they increase in value, because that's the nature of pensions. You're making a contribution every year. And if, on average, the return over a 20-year period is 4 or 5% higher, which all the empirical work suggests, that's not risky, that's smart.
Well, I just worry about the average 401k person trying to understand where impact investing is too risky and where it's a good bet. So I guess we'll have to see the creation maybe of new investment products.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we will pool them together so that you're not overly exposed to one individual thing. And that's our job as poolers. We do that with insurance. That's our heritage from 1836 when we were established. We pooled risks together to make them less risky for everyone else. We're going to do the same very much for these types of investments. We've done it for index funds, and Warren Buffett thinks that's a good idea. Vanguard have done a brilliant job on doing that. We've done a very good job over here of that. But we need other tools when we consider the time horizon for the people who are investing in those things. And so much takes place now in the private economy outside of the public economy that we have to give DC and DB pension holders access to those assets to improve their long-term return, improve the state of the economy, and deliver better returns for everyone involved in that process.
How does the concern about climate change and the move toward net zero emissions dovetail with impact investing?
I think climate change is the biggest investment opportunity in the world right now, because energy is now clean, green, and cheap. And so the technologists and the scientists have just done an amazing job to bring down the cost of energy so much, way off the scale from what, it's a Moore's Law application to a climate problem. And we talked earlier about telemedicine and the importance that that's going to have, and digital healthcare and the importance that's going to have. We now know that many of the investments that we make in climate change have a real economic benefit, but actually a real socially and economically useful, positive contribution. Therefore, we can invest literally tens of billions of pounds in the next few years in climate change initiatives and create returns for our shareholders: onshore wind, offshore wind, solar. We're building the biggest electric charging vehicle point system across the charging point system probably across Europe in partnership with EDF. So both strange partners to get together, but actually we have a common purpose. This is a massive market opportunity, and to get away from the fear that the customer has that they'll buy an electric car and they'll be forever running out of juice in a totally different way. We've got to get rid of that fear, and we'll invest in the infrastructure. But it's a profitable investment for us to do. And there are just so many opportunities, and doors lead to doors. As we've created one set of opportunities, another really interesting set emerges.
Yeah, just the trend of remote working, which I think a lot of people really like. And if they can keep it, they will. Is going to slam the value of commercial office space, but it's absolutely saving a huge amount on emissions.
Yes.
And also another trend that I don't see happening, but I think there's an upside, is substitute meat. That's the livestock is a bigger problem than fossil fuels.
It is, and I don't eat red meat. I don't drink caffeine, and I think that recognition of eating makes a difference to the state of the world, and we can all make personal choices about that. And we need some better way of communicating that. I think when people communicate very effectively, what the true economic cost is of this, then that can change people's behaviours.
Could you give me your definition of inclusive capitalism, which you say is the goal?
Inclusive capitalism consists. We don't want exclusive capitalism. Therefore, we need a form of inclusive capitalism, and it's doing things for the greater good. Is so that everybody gets the benefits. We were talking about earlier. So everybody's digitally included, their health included, their educationally included, and we can devise schemes and ways of investing money that truly make those things happen. For many years in the UK, if I take housing as an example, all the efforts were politically motivated and went into just the building for sale housing, so owning housing, whereas actually there's huge demand for residential housing. We've still got 1 million people on the waiting list for affordable housing here in the UK. And later life living, we've only just started to see what America's done in large parts of it, and actually created these incredible communities. Australia and New Zealand have done the same. And we haven't invested in those here in the UK. And so we've taken the initiative in a lot of these areas and invested in it. I mean, if I take elderly care as a great example, we gifted £20 million to Edinburgh University and £5 million to Newcastle to build a care home, and Edinburgh to research into how can we do better social care in the future. Because if you live in certain postcodes, you have a life expectancy now in the UK of 58.
Wow.
5 miles away, it's 85. How can we have 27 years of age difference within 5 miles? And that's the sort of inequality and inclusiveness that we want to stamp out. And that's why we've invested in these programs to really try and make a difference to people's lives. And we think we will, because we like America have great scientists, and you give them a problem, they solve it. And our job is to make the outcome better, because we really haven't done a good job of looking after our parents' friends, or whoever else may be in the care communities. And that's a really good example of public-private partnerships using universities effectively to solve a big societal problem that will then create an industry for us at some point in the future to invest in. And to a certain extent, that's what happened in California, where there was some initial funding from the government in that instance, and it spread throughout all the universities. And the biggest and most successful companies in the world now sit there. We think of inclusive capitalism along the same ways.
Just to wrap up, very fascinating conversation. You're obviously an optimist.
Yeah.
I would describe you as an optimistic person.
Yes, I am.
What advice would you give to the audience who are professionals, and also personal advice in terms of being an optimist going forward in the next year or so, or two?
Yeah, we have this impression we are the we, that actually instead of saying, oh, the government should do this or the government should do that, what can we do? And every meeting we have with the government, we always say, we don't need your money. This is what we want to do. If you want to nudge and support us, that's great. But we're going to do that anyway, because the world is just amazingly full of opportunities. And as you knock on one door, other doors open up to you. And by doing things, you create an environment that other people want to contribute. You know, whether that's the great community spirit or it's intelligent people, but people get emotionally charged by seeing great things being done. And some of the highest energy levels in the world sit in some of the most technologically advanced places in the world because they're doing such a lot at the moment. And that could be Shenzhen in China, as equally as San Francisco or Seattle, in fact, it's all the S's in America. But there's a doing culture there, and we have to create that doing culture everywhere. And yes, I'm an optimist. I'm not embarrassed about being an optimist because it helps drive our culture, our behaviors, and our values that don't just do situational analysis on the problem, identify the solutions, and make it happen.
Very uplifting, and I hope it becomes as contagious as the pandemic. Thank you. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.